Welcome to the Peak Endurance Podcast. Episode 111 is another interview with Luke Nelson, chiropractor at Health and High Performance. In this episode, we discuss medial tibial stress syndrome, or more commonly known as shin splints. Shin splints is a label often given for shin pain, but there are a number of things that can cause pain in the shins. So, in this episode, we will discuss some of the key causes. Now, if you enjoy this podcast, please go on over to Apple Podcasts or whatever platform you listen on to rate, review and subscribe, or on YouTube here. It really helps grow the audience and help me get more high-profile athletes on the show. Thank you so much for your ongoing support. Also, I am looking at creating another bonus podcast episode and would love to hear from you what the best running advice is that you have ever gotten. Could you do me a favor and send me a private message on Facebook to my personal page with an audio recording of your answer? It really needs to be audio. It is a podcast. I would love to have your voice on the podcast. Are injuries or niggles ruining your enjoyment of running and hindering your performance? Get on top of these and see the specialists, like Luke, at Health and High Performance. Utilising the latest in technology and with an absolute wealth of experience, the team at Health and High Performance can assist you with all of your running injury and performance needs. So, to get back to enjoying your running and achieving the results you know you are capable of, head to healthhp.com.au/run, or you can of course find them on Instagram, Health High Performance. Health and High Performance are located in Mont Albert, Melbourne, but of course they are also available for telehealth appointments, not only Australia-wide, but also around the world. Contact them on their website to find out more. Wild Earth Australia are the online store to help you make the most of the outdoors with top quality gear at great prices. Peak Endurance podcast listeners can use the discount code Peak Endurance, all capitals, to get 10% off their already amazing prices at checkout. Head on over to wildearth.com.au to get everything you need for your next adventure. Probably a raincoat, knowing the weather at the moment, if you can see through the window there. If you want to be your best, you need to be coached by the best. I have the experience and the knowledge to get you to your running peak. If you love to challenge yourself, email me, Isabel, at peakendurancecoaching.com.au to get a program designed just for you. Of course, in saying this interview, it does not substitute for medical advice. So please see your specialist if you are feeling shin pain. Of course, I do recommend Luke. It's always better to get something officially diagnosed so you know exactly what you are dealing with so you can get back to running even sooner. Enjoy this injury special with Luke. I hope you learn a lot.
And
why it's called shin splints?
I think it actually came from the description of what it feels like, because it can almost feel like, the tugging, the pulling there can feel like it's almost like a splintering of the of the bone there. So I think that's where the actual name developed, but it's one of these terms where people will use it for any shin pain. So it's not really a specific term. We don't tend to use that as a diagnosis of shin splints. Wow. Because, as I said, there can be a number of things that can cause shin pain. We've got some things like the front of the shin, and that's sort of around the first thing I'll say is, well, show me where you're feeling the pain. And if they're pointing more to the front of the shin, we're either thinking that it could be a anterior compartment syndrome, or it could be a dreaded stress fracture. That's always nasty. So we're always hoping and fingers crossed that it's not that. Of the shin there, the tibia. Then we've got the inside of shin, and this is where it tends to be most of the time. So we've got our medial tibial stress syndrome, and that's where we're sort of going to be basing most of the talk on today. That is the more common cause of shin pain in runners, that medial tibial stress syndrome. Then you've also, unfortunately, got your tibial stress fracture as well. So you can get an anterior stress fracture, which is a bit of a nasty one to deal with. And then you've got a medial stress fracture. So that's on the inside of the shin there. Those ones are not as bad as the front. You can often sort of run with those. The anterior ones on the front of the shin, you do often have to rest with those. We've also got another thing to consider on the inside of the shin there is what's called a deep compartment syndrome. So, and we can talk a little bit about how that differs to a medial tibial stress syndrome. And then we've also got calf muscle strain as well. So sometimes that can, if you've got of the gastrocs or the soleus, those two calf muscles, sometimes you can get a strain on those sort of more on the inside there. So that's something that we want to rule out as well. And then lastly, we've also got nerve issues and blood vessel issues down the leg can also cause shin pain too. So it's something that we, shin pain and shin splints is, we don't tend to use that so much as a term because there can be a lot of things that fall under that umbrella. So it's obviously really important to get a diagnosis of what's going on, and then that'll then dictate how you manage them, because they all can be slightly different in how you get on the road to recovery. So as I said, the main one that we're going to be talking about today is that medial tibial stress, and that is it's sort of the second most common injury actually in runners, behind patellofemoral pain. And we did obviously discuss that runner's knee in one of our previous podcasts. But it's fairly common. Between sort of 13 and 20% of runners will suffer from medial tibial stress. Some of the symptoms that you'll feel. So what people often describe is they'll say there's pain on the inside of the shin, and that's why I'll sort of always get them to say, "I'll point and show me where you feel it." And they'll often sort of draw a little bit of a line sort of up and down the shin there. It can often be sort of touched. They can sort of might feel a little bit gristly around through there as well. I say, it's a bit bumpy and lumpy around through the inside. And it's we also want to see it be that area of soreness, that area of tenderness. We want to see that be more than 5 centimeters. So if it's quite specific, so if it's really like, oh no, it's just right under my finger here, that can potentially indicate more a stress fracture. Where if it's a bit more widespread, that can help to. It's more likely to be to be medial tibial stress. Obviously aggravated with running and jumping. We tend to find that sometimes when these first begin, they can be a bit sore at the start of the run or the workout, and then they can disappear as the runner warms up, and then can appear afterwards when they've cooled down, and that pain can sometimes linger for the next day or the day after. But what can happen is that as it gets worse, the pain just then remains throughout the workout, and sometimes the runner needs to stop because the pain just gets too much. So yeah, if we can get it in the early stages, obviously ideal when things aren't too bad and they can run through it. It's a lot easier to manage than these ones that are really get sore and they have to stop running.
If they keep running and just keep running and put up with the pain, can that lead to a shin splint? Not shin, stress
fracture. Yeah, so it's interesting because there's sort of some debate in about what actually the cause of pain is with medial tibial stress. So the current way of thinking is that you've got your shin bone and your calf, your soleus muscle runs in, attaches into into the shin, and so the thought is that when you run and jump and move around, that soleus pulls on the shin, and that can cause a bit of a reaction, a bit of a tugging on that bone. And also what happens when you contract those muscles, it actually causes a bending and twisting in the bone there as well. So there's the theory there that, and that's normal. That's actually how it doesn't sound nice, but that's actually how our bones get stronger, and that's one of the the most important things of the key to strong bones is impact exercise, and also strength training as well is really good for that. So you don't always need the impact, but the strength of stimulating those muscles creates that pull on the bone and creates the strength there. So with that, the idea there being that if that's the cause, then potentially what can happen is if that continues to pull on an area that's not adapting very well, that could potentially lead down the path of a stress fracture. And we sometimes consider these on the spectrum of a stress fracture. So if you've got medial tibial stress, then you've got a stress reaction, then you've got a stress fracture, and then you've got a complete fracture. And so yeah, as you said, there is a possibility of continuing to push this, that it can lead to worsening of the actual bone health there. So yes, that's why again you want to get on top of these things, because they can, once they start persisting through exercise, then they do get more challenging to manage, and they do generally need a little bit of rest for that to then to settle down. One of the other things we don't want to see with these is if you're getting pins and needles in the feet or any symptoms down into the feet there, that tends to suggest it's more likely compartment syndrome. So and that's one of those differentials that we discussed early on. So that's the other thing too, is that it can appear on both sides. So it's quite common actually for it to be on both sides with these medial tibial stress. So unfortunately, it's about 40 or 50% of people actually have it on both sides. So and that's been sort of my experience as well. Some people on one, and others will get it on both sides at the same time. So there's some of the common symptoms that we look for. So now, in terms of what causes this, there's a lot of we've spoken previously before about the multifactorial nature of injuries, in that there's lots of different things that can contribute to an injury. So we've always got to consider, the workload. So how much the runner is doing, what their volume's like, how, what their intensity, have they all of a sudden ramped up their mileage too much, or have they all of a sudden done a lot of hills, or they've increase their speed work. All these sort of things, volume, hills, and speed work will all increase the demand on that on the bone, but also on those calf muscles as well too. And then we've always got to balance that, between the amount of work that you're doing and then your recovery. So what's the sleep like? What's the nutrition like? And then your stress in daily life. And then we've got things that can help to counterbalance that. So like your strength, what's your strength like? Your mobility, your mechanics, your running gait, all those sort of things as well too can contribute to it. So these are all the things that when someone comes in with any sort of injury, we're always sort of thinking, all right, well, in this particular person here, what is contributing to their particular problem? So all really important to be holistic in that sense. So if we talk about now a bit about how to manage this condition. So firstly, and probably most importantly, we've got about our loading, and we've discussed this before, and this is this can be the real benefit of having a coach, someone like yourself to guide the runner through an appropriate loading, because often in my experience, when we're seeing a lot of recreational runners, you leave them to their own accord. They're very haphazard in their training response of their training loading. So they can, one week they might do 4 runs, then they'll do none, and then they'll do 2, and then they'll do 0. And it's this sort of up and down effect that essentially creates a constant state of shock, and the body can't adapt to that.
We've seen this graph before, or very similar, and that really seems to be something that, like you said, is a big cause of any kind of injury. Is that really up and down loading?
Yeah, it is really important. I mean, if you take the load away, there wouldn't be an injury. So there's no running.
Like 1 week 80 k's, and next week 20 k's, then 70 k's, and yeah.
Yep.
And I think that's something for people to be really mindful of, is that consistency is really important.
Absolutely, and that's where having the guidance of a coach and a running program is really important, and being consistent with that. And we do often see this come up in people that have either had a long layoff from running, or they're starting back, or they're going on holidays, and they all of a sudden want to do decide I can run every day now, and when they're only used to running 3 times a week, and these things can appear there. And the other time that I'll commonly see it here is in football and soccer players as well, in the preseason, where they've had a few months off, and then all of a sudden they're starting up into doing a heap of running, and they start to develop these issues as well. So it's something that not just exclusive to runners, but anyone in any sort of running sport, if they essentially don't increase their loading correctly. And this is where we can see on that graph on the right side is gradually increase, and with some planned down weeks in there as well. So really important to look at. If you're having these issues, have a look at yourself, at what your training's been like, and see, all right, probably haven't been doing the right thing with that. And certainly enlisting the help of a coach can be really important to getting through getting that right. Next, we've got our calf strength, and it wouldn't be a talk without mentioning the good old calves, my favorite muscle group. So research has found that those actually with medial tibial stress often have weaker calves, and that's been my experience generally. Although sometimes you'll see people that do have adequate calf strength, and yet they can still have this condition.
Why would weaker calves lead to that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that one is that the calf muscles themselves actually help to absorb the impact. So every time the foot is hitting the ground there, those calves act like shock absorbers. So if you don't have that, then the shin will take that. And secondly, the act of strengthening the calf muscles themselves will have a strengthening effect on the bone. So we mentioned before how those calf muscles attach on there. And when we do strength training, it actually does cause some pulling and shearing on that bone. And the bone gets stronger by that. So that can be twofold: the lack of absorption, and also the lack of stimulation to strengthen that bone. So one way to test that our listeners can test that themselves is by doing a calf raise to fatigue test. And that's doing as many calf raises as you can till you can't do any more, making sure you're getting nice and high up. And we want to be looking for, the ballpark figure is 25 reps on each side, and no more than 10% difference from side to side. We've got a number of different sort of technologies that we use in practice, like force plates, to also get a more accurate reading of strength. But that's one of those tests that our listeners can do to see where they're at. And then obviously strengthening those calf muscles. Well, we've got the simple standing calf raise or seated calf raise are really good exercises to get that build that strength, and also help develop that bone strength as well too. Then if we go on to next part of sort of addressing this issue, there is strong feet. So obviously for runners, it's really important to the first thing that contact the ground. So it's important that we have good functioning feet to help absorb that impact and be a solid base for the rest of our body to be on. So some of the things that our listeners can test at home, to see what their foot strength's like and their foot control is doing spreading the toes apart. So just trying to fan your toes, spread them out there. Obviously doing this without your shoes on, and then we've got toe yoga, which is basically alternating the big toe up in the air and the remaining toes. So you're sort of alternating up and down, which can have some people looking confusingly at their feet, thinking, why can't I do that? And then the other one is you can go then onto some banded toe flexion, where you're sitting down, you have a band around the toe, and then you're pulling it down to the ground there. So you can do that on the big toe, and you can also do that on the remaining toes there as well. And then there's other things like foot crawls and calf raise splits as well. Lots of different ways. Even the act of doing a calf raise is also putting some strength in through those feet too. So that's another good way that we can build that strength in through the feet there. And then we've got our plyometrics. Now, obviously, this is not something where people may necessarily start straight into with this sort of condition. Although what sort of two the good things so we know for bone health and bone strength, running is not great for bone health because of the number of cycles, and in terms of cycles is in each time our foot hits the ground. And if we look at say over we're hitting 180 times a minute, and there can be thousands and thousands of foot strikes within a run. And so there gets to a point where the body's just like, oh no, this is enough, we've had enough here. So running in itself, especially distance running, is not the greatest for good bone health, and that's why we tend to see.
Because I always thought it was.
No, the best is we do want impact exercise, but that's where jumping and hopping really can be really important, and also with strength exercise. So they're actually the two better things. So sometimes with these, I get with these medial tibial stress, and even with stress fractures as well, they might not be able to to handle big volumes of running, but they can sometimes handle shorter distances mixed in with some plyometrics, so some jumping to really get that impact going, get that muscle contraction going, get that shearing on the bone, and develop that bone strength there, as well as then the heavy resistance training. So yeah, it's contrary to what I remember learning that years ago myself and thinking, oh, that doesn't sound right, but it actually is. It's more just that the body can't keep up with so many of those loading cycles within a distance run. It just gets to the point where it's like, okay, now we're starting to actually break down that bone. So and that's why you see stress fractures in runners, but you don't tend to see them so much in the legs in powerlifters and people that are in the gym, because they generally build up such a strong bone, and it never exceeds what it's capable of doing. So with our plyometrics, you can do things like jumping and skipping, with a jump rope, do some hopping. Pogo jumps are one of our favorites as well. And then going on to things like bounding. And they can be done. They actually can be done if the runner is not handling running very well. They can be done, sometimes 3 times a week in short doses. So we tend to you might have like a little bit of a 5-minute plyometric workout there, where you're just sort of getting a bit of that stimulation of the bone and the stimulation of that calf muscle, and then that's it. And then you leave it for another 2 days, let that bone remodel and settle down, and then you hit it again. So to develop that strength.
Do you think most runners should incorporate plyometrics like year round, or should it only be for like part of the year?
No, I do think I'm a big fan of plyometrics for runners. I think that, plyometrics is such a big wide spectrum as well. So, hopping on the spot is plyometrics, but also so is bounding. And bounding is where you're, essentially taking long strides and really being explosive there. That's one of the harder ones. And depth jumps, where you're jumping off a high box and jumping up onto another one. So it's quite a big spectrum. So yes, I think that runners should be doing plyometrics at all times throughout the year, but you can periodize it much like you would your strength training, where in your off season, or when you're building a bit of base and building your volume, that's when you can you might put 2 or 3 sessions in a week. Plyometrics you might only do once a week if you're doing really heavy plyometrics, and then when you're in season, or getting closer to racing, then that's when you can drop it down to just the once a week, and you might change the volume of the plyometrics that you're doing there as well too. So yes, I do agree that there's benefits, and there's also there's a number of studies to show the improvements in running performance with plyometrics, and some have even shown that taking out some running volume and adding plyometrics in to replace that actually got better results than what the group that kept their running volume steady. So yeah, I think there's definitely, it's one of those things that I find is underused in runners. They're often not doing it, but yeah, some really good effects, and can be very simple as well.
That's interesting. Now, with plyo, should you be wearing like running shoes or no shoes, or different kind of shoes?
That's a really good question, and the answer can be a bit of both. I think that there's benefits to, I mentioned before about the benefits of developing that foot strength. So I think there can be some benefits of doing certain plyometrics in bare feet, and others in shoes. And it does come down to, if there's people have got some other issues going on with their feet or their toes, or then I might sort of say, oh look, we'll keep you in shoes, but otherwise we'll go with the bare foot. And especially if you're starting someone from the very low plyometric exercises, the really easy ones, where you can start them with doing that barefoot, and then you can gradually increase that as you go. So I think there's a point to be made for either, and I will mix and match. So yeah, just depending on what, and also what their foot strength's like, because if you're looking at your foot strength, it's like, oh, it's not very good, you're not really used to going barefoot, then you just got to be careful with ripping that off and doing a lot of these jumps and hops in bare feet. But that's, yeah, good question.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Then we go on to some other things as well that can be used. So obviously the mainstays of management for this medial tibial stress are, getting your loads right, looking at your strength. We should also mention too that sometimes in these in runners that have this, they will often have strength deficits elsewhere throughout the leg. So they might be weaker in the hip or up and through the quads. And so that's important to assess the person as a whole. Some of the things and then we've also got our plyometrics as well too, to help that strengthen that calf and the bone there. Other things we've got self-massage. So, working through with a foam roller or the massage gun, massage ball, those sort of things there, working through the calf can help to give a bit of relief there. I'd stay away though from the shin. So don't rub, we sort of mentioned before that point where you touch along the shin there and it can feel quite gristly there. Don't rub along, self-massage along through that. It just hurts and it can sort of aggravate the condition. So I tend to say stay away from that, but certainly working around through that, through the calf there. Compression sleeves and stockings. So you certainly see in races a number of people sporting these out there. There is some evidence to suggest that they might help with this sort of condition, and the reason is not necessarily from keeping things warm or a blood flow or anything there. They actually, the theory there is that these compression socks can help to reduce vibration. So every time our foot hits the ground, everything will sort of vibrate, and that this frequency of vibration can sort of affect different sorts of tissues. So there's a theory there that wearing these sleeves can actually help reduce that vibration. And anecdotally, we find, and I don't know if you've ever worn them as well too, Isabel, but anecdotally, people find that my legs do feel better when I wear them. So for those people, I'm like, yep, if it feels good, then go for it. They're not going to do certainly not going to do any harm.
Yeah, that's right.
There's another product that's sort of recently come on the market called the Solution, which is a sort of like, as you can see this image here, which is a wrap that goes around the leg, and it's to be worn before exercise, and it's been shown to help improve ankle mobility there. So that's sort of marketed towards this medial tibial stress syndrome. So just so our listeners and our viewers are aware of what's out there. Foot orthotics as well too. So some people benefit from foot orthotics if there's some dysfunction around through the feet there that needs a bit of support. Then that's where an orthosis can be quite useful there. Shoe wear too. Again, coming back to fitting the person to their particular shoe can be really important. Nutrition as well, something that we want to make sure that, are they getting enough calories? Vitamin D, obviously really important for bone health. Unfortunately, we find that runners can sometimes underfuel and suffer for what's called relative energy deficiency syndrome, or what's called REDS. I know you've spoken about that before on your podcast as well too, Zoel, but yeah, that's something that does increase the risk of stress fractures. So I just want to make sure that you're getting enough food in there. And the last one is shockwave as well too. So and that can be used over that area.
And so shockwave be done on the calf or on the shin?
No, it's more done over the shin. So as you can imagine, it hurts. I don't have it. I don't use it myself. But it's just one of these things that people will use out there. Essentially, what they do is just with sort of a gun there, and they go up and down the shin. But as you can imagine, it is quite sore. So that's one of those ones that is out there. In terms of return to running, so quite often, as we mentioned earlier, that you can run with some discomfort with this. Certainly, if we like before, and the other conditions we've spoken about, if you can keep the pain below a 4 or 5 out of 10 for you, then that's ideal. But it must not exceed that during the run, after the run, or the day after. So if we're sort of finding, I kept it at a 4 during the run, but geez, afterwards I was hobbling around, it was a 6 or 7 out of 10, and the next day it was really bad too, then that's a sign that no, that's a bit too much. You need to dial that back. And that can be, the next run you can try just reducing what you did that particular run. You try reducing that a little bit shorter. And then sort of gradually increasing from that. So the other thing we want to avoid doing is avoid running uphill. So uphill is not as good for this condition. And the reason being there is it's quite an interesting one. There was a study released a couple of years ago that looked at the stress on the shin bone with uphill running, and what they found was that it was actually higher, which is contrary to what you might think and contrary to what I believed, and that I think that, downhill running, because you've got the flight time there and that impact coming down. But in actual fact, what's causing the increase in stress on that shin bone is because when we run uphill, we're using our calf muscles a lot more. And remember how we said before, when the calf muscles are really working hard, they are pulling more on that bone. So that's when we tend to get more that bending forces happening through there. So I'll tend to just keep people running flat. So I won't even sort of say, downhill running. Just try and keep as flat as possible when sort of coming back from this, but especially avoiding uphills.
What about some people who might be inclined to be taking anti-inflammatories so that they can run?
Yeah, so it's the same thing now. I think you can be. We mentioned before about that spectrum there, and by doing that, you do run the risk of moving further along the spectrum of going into a stress reaction and a stress fracture. If you're essentially sort of numbing the pain there, unfortunately with anti-inflammatories too, they're not the greatest for bone health in that you actually need, if there's something happening at the bone there, you need your body to come in there and repair that. And anti-inflammatories are designed to sort of settle things down. So it sort of can delay, it's not great to use. Why we don't use, if someone's got a fracture or a stress fracture, we certainly don't use anti-inflammatories there. So I sort of treat that the same way. Probably the only time I'd say to use anti-inflammatories is if we've got a race coming up this weekend, or and we do need to cheat a little bit, and we do need to numb the pain. Otherwise, I tend to stay away from anti-inflammatories for this condition.
And I agree with you. Like pain, as much as we don't like it, it's actually giving us information, and the information that we're getting is maybe we shouldn't run.
That's exactly right. Yeah, it's and certainly sometimes our pain response can go overboard, and we might need to quieten that down, and medication can be needed for other conditions, but I don't tend to use it so much, and don't tend to recommend it so much for this one.
Yeah.
So running technique is something that can be quite useful in terms of modifying running technique for this, and certainly things that can be done to help with this sort of issue. And obviously, assessing and seeing what your running technique is like is obviously important before you just go changing things. But some of the things that I find that can be useful here might be increasing a step rate or increasing the cadence if that cadence is too low, increasing the step width, so going very slightly wider, and we're not talking miles apart there, but sort of anywhere up from 3 to 5 centimeters apart. So increasing that apart there, especially if you're one to run almost run 1 foot in front of the other. So having a slight separation between where each foot is landing. And the other one too is cueing to land, to reduce the impact when you're landing there. So that might be running quietly, or pretend you're running on hot coals there. So just landing a lot lighter on the ground, so rather than too heavy and pounding the pavement, so to speak. So there are a few of the running technique tips that can be used. And the $1 million question, or how long does this take to get better? Well, a lot of the studies that will show that it can be a bit of a long slog over 3 months to run at a decent intensity for 20 minutes. So for a lot of runners, that's not a lot, and that is a fair length of time. Now, in my experience, that if we can get onto it earlier, and that if things are appropriately managed, we can often keep the runner going through. Although there are some that do need some time off, that we do need to reduce their mileage down a little bit, and fewer that we then have to actually stop them running for a short period of time and switch to cross training. So things like aqua jogging or bike or cross trainer, and strength training, to allow things to settle down. So then it comes down to sort of how reactive they are during their run. Like if they're like, oh no, I'm a 6 or a 7, we do need to settle things down a little bit. So that might need a little bit of a spell, but like with all the runners, we want to get them back out there as soon as possible, and not have them missing out on it. But sometimes it may be needed for them.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing from you with a lot of these that we've done is that sooner, getting on foot soon, not just ignoring it and hoping it'll go away, but actually being proactive and getting it seen to and getting it started on the recovery.
Yep, exactly right. That's it. Know what you're dealing with. It's
Yeah,
not just shin splints. There's lots of things that can cause shin pain. Finding out what it is, finding out why it's happening, where you've gone wrong. Is it a loading issue? You need to get your running program right. Is it a strength issue? Is it you just need more recovery? Whatever it is, and then tailoring the management to get that right and back out on track.
yeah, yeah. So I think that's something the listeners really need to take to heart, because I do find a lot of runners just and myself in the past included would just ignore things thinking, oh, it'll go away eventually, but it's not generally the way it works.
No, putting your head in the sand, unfortunately, and especially for this condition, is
Yeah,
it can be well, catastrophic in terms of where
yes.
it can get to. So no, you don't want to let it get to that.
No, exactly. All right. Well, thank you, Luke, for giving us a bit more information on this condition. And like I said at the start, I hope we've helped some people, and some people who might be experiencing and thinking, well, if I just take a week off and then go straight back into it, it'll be fine. That's probably almost one of the worst things you can do. It's getting it diagnosed and then working on strength and everything else to improve the condition.
That's it. Well, thanks very much for having us as well.